What happens while you sleep? Just ask Sandra Bullock or Peter Gallagher or Bill Pullman, for those of you who've watched the movie while you were sleeping. What happens while everyone sleeps is only one relatively minor aspect of this text. What's deeper and what's more central is the metaphor for things that happen that are unexpected, uncontrollable, and undefinable. We have difficulty with dreams because they seem random, incomprehensible, and irrational. We have difficulty with unpredictability and loss of control because we feel vulnerable and uncertain. Any gardener or farmer or agriculturalist of any kind will tell us what an unpredictable venture planting, cultivating, and harvest is. There are so many factors that play into the success of a crop. My father was a farmer when I was very young, and I would recall how he would go outside and he would look up at the sky and he would try to see, will it rain? When will it rain? How hard will it rain? And will there be hail? At that time, there were no irrigation systems, and some years drought completely wiped out the entire crop. Other years, there was too much rain at the wrong time of the season, and it ruined large swaths of grain. It was a precarious livelihood. So I have some understanding why the servants were so upset when they saw the weeds coming up in this field next to the grain. How much can you control? How much can you control when you're asleep? This is what concerned the servants in this story. Something they didn't expect happened while they were asleep. Someone had planted a crop in the field, and one morning they woke up to find a surprise. And I'm telling you, it wasn't a birthday party kind of a surprise. It was more like a, oh, I've been broken into kind of a surprise. So these servants are distressed when they find the crop that had begun so well has been compromised. They're troubled. Their confusion and anger is palpable. Now what? Who's responsible for this? They did what any wise servant would do. They seek out the supervisor, the landowner, and ask for clarification. This tells me that they were responsible workers, concerned about the success of the whole project, not just their own limited little piece. It also tells me that they knew where to go when they faced a problem. They could have just talked amongst themselves and after some consultation, gone and done what they thought needed to be done. But they chose not to do that. They seek out the landowner because at this point, it seems they don't really know how this could have even happened. The initial report and what follows gives insight into what kind of leader the landowner is. The servants come to him, confident that they would be heard and receive clear direction. They trusted him. Didn't you plant good seed in the ground? Then how is it that it now has weeds? They ask. Well, the first question seems a little more like a confirmation of what they already know or already suspect. Based on what they knew of the landowner, they're certain that he would have used quality seed. And presumably, they also knew the condition of the land in which they planted this seed. So the question could be articulated more like this. Master, since you planted good seed in your field, how is it that it now has weeds? Fair enough. It's not a criticism. It's simply an expression of perplexity. It's a request for clarification. The landowner answers in a straightforward manner, simply stating, an enemy has done this. No defensiveness, no need for an analysis of how this could have happened. It simply did. The landowner didn't allow his servant's panic to become his own. That's a quality leader. With only a few words, he made it clear that some things happen when you sleep, when everyone sleeps. Since none of us can be in control of every circumstance all of the time, unpredictable things like this will happen. The servants seem to accept that without question, but they have a follow-up question. It's about mitigation. Surely this is not a situation that can be tolerated and left unattended to. Do you want us to go and gather them, meaning the weeds? This is logical. Obviously, the servants who till and tend the crops are able to differentiate between grain and weeds. So what is the answer? The answer is not what they expect. They thought it would seem logical to address a problem once it's been detected, not to let it sit. But that's not what they had. They got a different answer. And this is where it gets interesting. The landowner gives his answer and explains the ground on which it rests. No, I would not like you to go pull up those weeds, because in doing so, invariably some of the plants which were intentionally planted there will be uprooted too. Just leave them until harvest, when the crop is robust and mature. That's the time for separation. There are many lessons that can be drawn from this parable. Number one, the landowner is concerned about what he cannot control, but he is not overly concerned. It doesn't occupy his attention for very long. He's clear on what falls into the category of things I can't control. He doesn't launch a new organizational structure to patrol the field around the clock. He doesn't devise an extraction mechanism that would safeguard the crops and kill the weeds. That person was really on time there, Sue. And we could talk about herbicides, but we won't. Maybe that's another sermon for another day. But whatever venture we are a part of, whether that's family or friendships or congregational life, one's profession or community advocacy, those who try to control every aspect of the enterprise will burn out. They will also contribute to a decimated workforce. Or they'll be left overseeing a stressed and reactive undertaking. None of this is productive or wholesome. A second lesson we can learn. The landowner embodies this relaxed attitude that one can cultivate toward all that happens when one is at rest. In other words, he's content in his place in life, peacefully allowing a process to move forward organically. These are the kinds of people who maintain their own equilibrium without being 100% aware of what's going on at all times. Think about it. Aren't the messages we seek out for our reassurance the ones that urge us in one way or another to keep calm and carry on? Now, that should not be misconstrued as naivete, nor used as an excuse to be poorly informed, aloof, or disengaged. It's an invitation to practice faith, which is essentially a confidence, despite what could happen and what even seems inevitable. It is a trust in God when that seems reckless. What this stance tells me is that the landowner has done his homework. He knows his industry, he's researched best practices, he knows the players, and he is content to play his role. Thirdly, this speaks to me of a paradox, of a non-dualistic approach to life. It's a lesson in how to wait and how to allow for more than our own perception and our narrow place in life. Life takes time. Life is unpredictable. It requires that we hold what we understand and what we don't understand in tension. The servants were anxious about what they saw as an unwelcome intruder into what they thought they could control, into the landowner's pristine field. Are we anxious or defensive when we observe people who express their preferences, their theologies, their political viewpoints very, very differently than we do? Do we consider differences as intrusive? Granted, the landowner clearly speaks of an enemy having a role in the state of the field. When we observe divisiveness, the angry rhetoric, the inhumanity between human beings, we too could say, an enemy has done this. And we may be right. But this in no way gives us the authority to point a finger at who we think it is, or who we think and what we think is the enemy. It could actually be a force that we're not even conscious of at this moment. Life takes time. Premature judgments usually do not age well. The weeds and the grain can live side by side. Varying theologies, wild discrepancy in political conviction, and differences in priorities live side by side. In fact, they should. This is living with paradox, living in the tension of no longer and not yet. This takes wisdom. From this text, we learn that living with paradox or in tension is tenable until harvest. Until harvest. To know what and when harvest is takes a lot of discernment. Knowing at what point a separation becomes imperative is not a light matter. Now, if we extend the story beyond what's recorded here, we would actually watch this field as both the weeds and the grain developed. We would be privy to further conversations between the servants and the landowner. And at some point, the landowner would make the decision, now it's harvest time. Again, this decision is not based on a whim or on subjective criteria, but it is based on a thorough understanding of grain, the field, observing the procedure, harvesting procedures, and the timing. A fourth lesson we can learn is to be prepared and informed. Preparation and being informed contributes to peace of mind. It enables us to rest in the unknown. We can prepare, but with the knowledge that our preparation is always limited, and it is always subject to adjustments. None of that clashes with our peace of mind. Something that almost gets lost in this text is the unapologetic no. Should we pull out the weeds? No. That doesn't mean that the servant's questions are off limits or in some way off base. Their suggestion was just ill-timed. And a trusted leader can and will say no. Sometimes with a corresponding reason, as it was the case in this text, and sometimes not. If we look back to the preamble to this parable that Jesus told, we find these words: the kingdom of God is like. And then comes this story. The story that gives insight into who God is. Because Jesus lived on this earth as a full representation of God, he explains the kingdom of heaven to help us understand. Jesus' stories allow theological concepts to become accessible and understandable and applicable through the insight given by the Spirit. So, trust times of sleep. I mean, deep, refreshing, uninterrupted rest. Trust that what happens during well-deserved and imperative downtimes is part of the process. Trust the people placed in position to help with discernment. Trust the paradox. Trust the no. Trust the keeper and the initiator of the kingdom stories. So who knew that the kingdom of God could in part be understood as what happens when everyone is asleep.